Hello, my friends. So today, I'd like to talk a little bit about conspiracy theories relating to the NASA space program, and in particular, the moon landings. Now, this is a topic that has never really interested me greatly. I haven't done much research into it. I don't have a strong or certain conclusion one way or the other. I think that there are good reasons to doubt the official narrative, and there's always good reason to doubt what the government, the corrupt oligarch-run government, is telling us about literally anything. My initial assumption for anything that the government tells us is that it's a lie. But I can't tell. I haven't looked into the evidence. I can't give you a good argument as to whether or not the moon landings or the space program in general are fake. But what I can do, and what I'll try to do in this video, is give a plausible explanation as to why the government, the oligarchy, would fake something like the moon landing. Why would they spend millions of dollars? Why would they go through the whole media campaign? Why would they put so much time, money, and effort into faking something that seems to have no clear, precise purpose, such as the moon landing? You know, something like 9/11, for example, there's a pretty specific motivation that you can imagine about why the government would fake such an event. Clearly that was in order to terrorize the public, justify wars, endless wars in the Middle East, this war on terror, justify the whole restriction of rights and this encroaching police state, this despotism that has come out of the war on terror and really never gone away. That whole set of motivations seems pretty clear as to why they would fake something like the 9/11 attack. But the moon landing is a little different. And by the way, if you're interested, what got me into this topic recently was there's a channel called AC Weisbecker. I'll put a link to it in the description. And they have a set of videos that shows some pretty blatant contradictions in the narrative given by NASA about a number of different issues. One prominent issue that I saw that was pretty convincing to me was that you have a number of astronauts that say it's impossible to see stars in space not because their eyes aren't adjusted or anything. We had a discussion about this in my Discord, trying to figure out whether or not there's a rational explanation for this, but it's not because their eyes haven't adjusted. It's not because they're I don't know. The reason they give is that the sun drowns out the light from the stars in outer space. So all you could see is the light from the sun and the darkness of outer space. Whereas another set of astronauts, including people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and press releases from NASA themselves, say that no, the sun doesn't drown out the stars even when you're on the daylight side, because there's no atmosphere to scatter the light. And the reason you don't see the stars during the day on Earth is because the light from the sun is reflected in all directions by the air around us, by the atmosphere. And when that happens, and there's light coming in all directions from the sky, you can't distinguish between the light from the stars and the light being scattered by the air, so you can't see the stars. Okay, that's one example. If you go look at his videos, it shows quite clearly there are a number of examples from official sources saying that you can see the stars, and another that says no, you cannot see the stars. And this contradiction seemed pretty egregious to me. It seemed pretty ridiculous. So I started thinking about this issue, about the whole question of the space program. And so let me get back to the motivation. Why would the government go through so much trouble to fake the space program and the moon landing? The moon landing in particular, that's the big one. Typically what you'll hear in a history class when you learn about the moon missions is that NASA and the United States government spent so much time and money just to impress the Soviets, to show the world and to show the Soviets who is supreme in terms of scientific advancement, technological prowess, and the ability to go into space and get to the moon first. We were trying to one-up the Soviets. But I think the real reason why the government would fake something like the moon landing is not to impress the Soviets, but to impress the average person. And this, I think, it's bigger than it seems. This is a bigger point than it might seem to begin with. The government wants to impress upon the average person that there exists this elite class within the state, this elite class within society that is actually tied to and controlled by the state, almost synonymous with the state, of experts, of authorities, of high-minded scientists and technicians who are capable of literal godlike feats, godlike powers, like sending a man to the moon, this mystical, magical place that nobody has ever gone to, that nobody could ever even imagine going to, a place that used to actually be considered a god itself. People used to think the moon was a god or a goddess, and now we've gone to it. We sent a person there, and we brought him back, and this is a godlike ability. This is something that is unfathomable to most people. And yet this class of elite technicians and scientists working in the government, they did it. So that's, I think, the main part of the motivation. That I think has created the impression in most people's minds that we are in good hands. That the people who are running the show here, the people who are in charge, are more advanced than anyone could ever imagine. They're more capable than anyone could ever imagine. And every question that follows, such as think of today with COVID. Are they telling the truth about COVID? Are they able to do something like produce a vaccine that's going to save us? Should we trust what they tell us about other questions of science, other questions about what reality is or what we can and cannot do? Of course we should, because they're able to go to the moon. They're able to do these things that, are unquestionably amazing and advanced, and just how could we ever, oppose or go against what they say when they've done such amazing things? Have you ever gone to the moon? Have you ever, are you capable of creating a space shuttle and sending someone to the mystical moon? Of course not. We should be listening to the people who sent someone to the moon. And obviously this isn't exactly the direct train of thought that most people go through when they're thinking about questions like this, but it is something that I think when you learn it from a very young age as a child, it leaves a lasting impression on you. And it is this kind of impression. It's this kind of thing where you get this perspective of the state and of the scientific establishment and the people who are in charge here as just godlike, having godlike abilities. And that, I think, it creates this authority worship. It creates a sense of profound faith in their abilities. So there's that. And then also, this is a note that actually was made in one of the Weisbecker videos that I watched, it referring to a line in 1984 that rejecting the evidence of your eyes and ears was the final and most essential command of the party in 1984. And why is this the most essential and final command of the establishment of the party in 1984? If the moon landing was fake, for example, and you look at what NASA says, if you look at the narrative that we're given about it, and you can notice that there are certain discrepancies, certain inconsistencies, like whether or not we could see the stars in outer space. Like another example he gives is a few astronauts say that space modules without climate control will get extremely hot, while other space modules without climate control would get very cold. And there's this other contradiction there. If you look at a story and it's full of contradictions and you can't make sense of it, and that story is supported and it's given to you by the elite experts, authorities, establishment figures that you have this faith in, and then you are compelled to believe it, that, I think, produces within people really a deep unconscious fear of having that shame revealed to them, of having that, the fear of being revealed as a willing fool. And so once you accept something on the basis of authority alone, even though it doesn't make sense, even though you can't understand it, I think that produces in a person a sort of mental block to ever being critical of that elite or that authority figure ever again. Because once you do this, once you accept something on this basis of experthood or authority, even though you don't understand it, the fear of answering the question of why don't I understand with the real answer, which is it doesn't make sense, rather than I'm just too dumb to understand, then you reveal yourself as a willing fool. So you have to maintain this illusion of, I just can't understand. I just don't have the intelligence to understand. And true, there are a lot of people out there who don't have the intelligence to understand complex ideas. But I think for a lot of people who are relatively intelligent, who have a decent level of intelligence, it's not the case that they just can't understand. It is the case that they have accepted it on the basis of authority alone, and that they are willingly ignorant, that they're willingly acting foolish. So once that happens a single time in an instance like looking at the events of the moon landings, looking at the events of 9/11, it is possible to explain these events. It is possible to look at these events critically and see that the narrative we're given is nonsense, has contradictions, cannot be true, and to recognize that the reason you don't understand it is not because you're too dumb, it's not because your intelligence level is too low, it's not because you haven't been trained in these fields, it's because the story doesn't make sense. I think that is possible for most people to come to that conclusion. But because most people are enamored or sort of glamored by the authority, and because there's the pressure of wanting to be accepted, fearing the social ostracization, fearing the punishment that might come from questioning the authority, all of these social pressures combine to force a person to say to themselves, I'm going to accept this even though I don't understand, and it must be because I'm too dumb, because I cannot face up, I cannot bring myself to recognize that I'm accepting this because I'm afraid, I'm accepting this because I want to be accepted by the authority, I'm accepting this purely on the basis of the authority figure telling me this and because of social pressures, even though I know it doesn't make sense. They can't bring themselves to that shameful realization, so they cling to the idea that they must be too dumb. It's like a psychological protective mechanism to keep them from realizing how shameful they're acting. So that keeps people willingly ignorant and compliant with the authority figures, I think, for the rest of their life, because the longer somebody holds onto and defends something that doesn't make sense, that they can't explain, that they're promoting based on the authority alone, the longer they hold on to that, the greater their shame will be if they ever finally realize, or if they ever finally face up to the fact that they're just promoting it because they're afraid of the authority, and because they want to be accepted by the authority, and because there are these social pressures, and it doesn't make sense because it's nonsense, not because they're too dumb to understand. But in fact, they were smart enough to understand. They should have understood. They should have seen how nonsensical it was. And a group of people, a population that is capable of that kind of doublethink, that Orwellian style of doublethink, will always be very compliant with the authorities. So I think that if I were an elite, if I were in the oligarchy, those are the reasons why I would promote something like the moon landings. To give this image of oneself, of myself as an elite, of being a part of this godlike establishment class, this godlike scientific elite, capable of just amazing, magical feats of strength and ability, and at the same time sort of enchanting the population with this need to doublethink, this need to forego one's ability to understand in favor of just accepting something on the basis of authority, and basically compromising one's own critical thinking faculty. So that's all I have to say for today. Thank you for watching.